Okay, we're recording now. You want to
Hi
start?
and welcome. Yes, welcome to Anything and Everything with Reason. Yes. It's a late one, but we are back after a very short few weeks hiatus. So, and how are we, Riordan?
Yeah, I'm good. I finally got my mouse tracking, so I'm happy.
House tracking is always a good thing.
Alrighty, so we're gonna start with these, are we? You want to start, or you want me to start on this?
Yeah, well, I will start because
Alright.
new news this week. Canada has elected a new prime minister, 43-year-old Justin Trudeau of their what they call a Liberal Party. It's not like us, liberal as in the real term, which means open. He's a pro-science and very much a pro-climate type of prime minister. In fact, one of the first acts he actually passed through in Parliament after being elected is that the Joint Strike Fighter plane that Canada had been signatory to has been rejected. They are no longer actually going to put money into funding a fighter aircraft. They're going to actually put money into funding social services and more into science.
So they realise that
So
nuclear weapons are more efficient. Let's do that.
well, we're talking about a joint fighter aircraft that is what 15 years behind schedule, with out-of-date
Yeah,
technology, and it's barely functional. So it's not using up-to-date
still better
technologies,
than
really.
Australian firefighter fight, like the ones.
Yeah. So it just goes to show if the people push enough, they can get a positive result. In this case, it's a positive result for actual reason and science. So, and how does it reflect in Australian politics? Well, we are still currently looking at a $420 million funding cut to our science organisations, including the CSIRO. And it's five key research agencies of having all their funding cut under the current government. We are hoping, with a new election looming in the near distant future, that people will realise and will vote for a true Liberal Party, not the Liberal Party, which will then restore funding to science, medicine, education, and social reforms. So back to funding reality and not pie in the sky ideas of economics, which aren't quite real. So. So that's my news of the week.
Okay, so you've got your one. Actually, that was to do with the. Oh, I'm trying to remember now. Sorry, I'll go on to my proper news story because I forgot the one about Canada at the moment. Actually, that's right. I remember now. Which was talking about the part the. Not Canada itself. Sorry, this is something else. But I just realised what I was remembering because I'm insane. Which was actually about the European Union. I don't know why I thought about Canada. Which they're actually. This is one I only just heard about today. Um,
Hmm.
and who's the leader of the Virgin Air airline? Richard Branson, isn't it?
Richard Branson, yeah,
Yeah, that's
let's
right. Yeah,
back to that.
he
Yes.
was, according to him, the European Union. Sorry, the United Nations is actually looking at. God damn, my brain is all over the place. United Nations, European Union, whatever. It's all the same for me. The United Nations is looking at decriminalizing drug use and possession. So that's at least a good step in the right
That is a
direction.
very good step
Yeah.
because the war on drugs failed a long time ago. And the moment you criminalize something like drugs, what you do is you create a criminal underclass and all the bad criminal elements and crime that goes along with it.
It's not even
Uh,
really a crime though. It's a mental health issue. It's
no,
a
what I'm
health
saying
issue.
is,
Like
yeah, what I'm saying is once
it's
you
ridiculous.
create a
Yeah.
criminalizing, you create the criminal underclass that goes along with it. If you remove the criminalization, as they have done in countries like Amsterdam, but it still has government controls because you can't have a free for all, then you remove the criminal element, the crime suddenly disappears that is associated with it.
Well, this was
The
the look at in the Netherlands and with the Dutch and so on and so forth as well.
mm,
Which was to do with decriminalization there. I
mm,
do feel like I do think that they have most of the soft drugs there are legal, and you
yes,
find that
yeah,
actually really people don't like they experiment them and try them and then they kind of don't really use them or they
yeah.
use them very infrequently. I feel like that I'm not a big drug person, but I do feel like a lot of people are capable of using things in a way that's not. like
As long
it's
as they're properly informed, and
yeah,
yeah, there are controls and situations and support mechanisms there, which is what they do have in the Netherlands. It's like I said, not a free for all. There are
yeah,
government controls. Yeah, and it works. And like I said, you remove the criminalisation, therefore you remove the
the
associated
profit.
criminal to make money off it.
Yeah,
Yes, so less crime. There'll be less murders, there's less break-ins because the prices of the drugs come down. They're easier and more safely able to be obtained, and because they're regulated, they're
clean.
cleaner, a lot safer. Yes, yeah. So many years ago, I had conversations with the Australian Institute of Drug Use, and I'm not sure the exact name. Um, when they came to talk about drug use and the problems with drug use, and they also agreed back then, this was over 25 years ago, that drug use should have been decriminalised back then because they recognise the positive effect it has on taking away the crime. You actually create crime by making it a criminal offence. You don't remove crime. Yes.
Yeah, the thing is that as well. I mean, I guess a large part of that is it's like a lot of things that are incentives from the government that are created. There's always someone making money out of it in the government as well. So they're just
Yes.
like, oh, we're making money out of this.
Yeah.
We don't care. It's like, yeah. Alrighty, so we want to move on to the three news stories we have each. If you want to
Yes,
go now.
certainly. Okay, well, I'll go first then. Okay, microRNAs are not being used by the body when they are being ingested. So, new news that's just come out from sciencetechnologyaustralia.org. Um, microRNAs are small bits of, well, you could say messenger DNA, which are created made small enough
Messenger
so they can
RNA.
get out of the cell walls and transport it into other cells to carry information across to do things like turn on genes, which then might release a protein to say, I don't know, make a cell grow. Um,
Or
Now, it
produce
was
proteins.
originally thought that things like cow's milk, which contains runs of microRNA, were being not only when they're ingested, were being absorbed into the body, and then that microRNA was then incorporated into our own cells. So this would possibly lead the way to, in future, to creating microRNA food-based drugs. Turns out that's not actually the case. So when you ingest food which contains microRNA floating around in it, it gets broken down and it does not get absorbed into the body and uses microRNA components. It gets broken down into its base elements. So just small bits of disconnected acids, as it were. So
The base pair,
this
the
is
bases.
also a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is digesting food is not going to change your cell structure. You cannot catch or get a reprogrammed mutation from eating something. Bad news is we can't use this as a vector for getting drugs into directly into the cell system in the body,
Not
which
directly anyway. Yeah.
well, fairly directly because the microRNAs, if it wasn't broken down, would then be transported into the system
Yeah,
across
yeah, yeah.
the cell bridge divide and into the cells.
Well,
But
it
it doesn't happen.
has to get. It's like it was like the whole comment about HIV ingestion and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Unless there's some very direct contact with blood vesicles, and when it gets
Mm.
down to the stomach, it gets
Yeah,
destroyed.
that's what they originally thought. It may not actually become destroyed. So when it's
Yeah.
ingested, it was actually going through the complete strings. That is strings of the acids were staying complete. They weren't getting broken down. But in this case, no. It turns out they are getting broken down. So good news and bad news on that front. So
So
okay,
bit of an issue for viral therapy there potentially. Then if
it
they wanted
is
to
it. Viral, although they with viral therapy, they'd actually more likely die
buy
direct
directly, yeah.
direct injection into the bloodstream. But it was hoping that we could add medicines that would be, or medical treatments that could be digested and taken in through the system. So it just goes to show once again when people talk about, oh, this is great for your system when you
Oh,
eat it. No, not necessarily
I
so, because bioavailability will not allow the uptake of things like
I
this.
do
So
guess I do guess it does depend on the structure of that mRNA as well. No, maybe more so on actually mRNA would be less stable than would probably be a little bit less stable anyway, because mRNA is only one strip that's reverse transcripted
Yeah.
off of the main part, whereas a full see, the thing is, some
Mm.
viruses themselves, they're just pieces of an RNA, and they can
Yeah.
actually
But
still
they
get
have,
through.
but the viruses themselves actually have a full protein coat,
Yeah, they
so
have a cytoplasm.
survive
Yeah.
into the system and therefore get close to cell walls, and then while they still have a protein coat, transfer into the cell walls, say via the stomach or the
Yeah.
intestine, as opposed to bare mRNA, which doesn't have a protein shell on the outside. So it's the idea of mRNA, is, of course, sort of developed over billions of years, that it allows transfer from cell to cell, but in the stomach it gets broken
Oh
down.
well,
So
not only just from cell to cell, but generally out of the nucleus, because it can't actually get, like, DNA is too big to get out, so it
yes,
needs
too
to be
big
able
to
to get to
pass
like
out.
the ribosomes
So it
to produce
sends
proteins or something.
messages,
Yeah.
being literally a small message. Here, can you take this message through that small porthole there and transfer it over to that next cell for me? Yeah, no problems. I can get out of there. There's a small doorway. It's just right the size for me to get out of. Yeah. Yeah, I can't get out, says DNA, because I'm too damn big. Here. So mRNA is just the right size to get out.
We have.
Mm.
I've got a couple. I've got one kind of funny one, and I got two that are related to diseases. I'll start with the two diseases. I'll leave the funny one for later on.
Yes.
The first one was one from a few weeks ago, and because we haven't done a show, I've still been sitting on it,
Mm.
which was to do with contagious Alzheimer's. So,
Oh, yes.
Alzheimer's has been kind of, obviously, cancer and Alzheimer's. These are the two kind of diseases where people are like, well, you can't, it's not contagious, but barring some types in animals. But
Although viruses that are contagious can cause cancers. Yes.
yes. The thing here was that with the contagious Alzheimer's, it was an issue with it was a few decades ago. I think it was 40 decades ago. It was a long time ago. This was before that
Mm.
they could produce human growth hormone. So they would take it from the pituitary gland of
Yes.
cadavers. And what they didn't realize was there was misfolded proteins in there. Was peptide amyloid beta, sorry. And what was happening was they were injecting these human growth hormones into people, and then those amyloid B seeds would grow the plaques in those patients. So now we're starting to
Essentially, Hans
find,
Jakov's disease. Yes.
yeah. So we're starting to see that now there's people that have had this human growth hormone treatment that are now starting to get Alzheimer's. So it's like, oh, now it's good because now we have this data set to realize that there
There's
is
another.
another way that someone could get infected through, potentially through,
Yeah.
surgical tools or anything. But
Yeah,
yeah,
new vector discovery of a new vector, and also yeah, another type of effect that another what's the word thing that actually
prion,
causes Alzheimer's. Yeah,
new prion
yeah,
that we
a new
found.
prion and another type because Alzheimer's is yeah, as we said before, like cancer isn't one disease; it's
Yeah, multiple different things. Yeah.
it's multiple causes. So yeah, they still have issues with plaque, but it appears that a regular, no, not currently well used drug that's used is used for treatment for arthritis is actually quite effective in reducing plaque buildup in brains. So
Oh,
that's another treatment that actually would be helpful.
there,
in,
there's a few of them actually that they're still
mm,
trying out, but the main issue is the blood-brain barrier because you can dissolve the
mm,
plaques and destabilize them, but then you have to actually get them,
them out.
out through the blood-brain barrier. So
Well,
they're
that's
starting
the
to
beauty of
use.
the beauty of this arthritis treatment. It's cheap, it's common, it's been around for years, and it appears to be actually quite effective. I mean, I think they're talking around the 20s to 30% mark, which is still quite high. That is a significant number. It's not as high as 80%, but yeah,
It's
it's a good treatment for
it's
one type.
it's worth going into trials. I don't think it's actually high enough for general use to be cleared for general use, but
Yeah, well,
it's worthwhile having a look into because you might find some other related
Well,
chemical.
yeah, it's currently because there's a cohort study, so it's looking at existing people who have been taking the drug, and they are doing clinical studies on the effects. It was found from just observation as in a cohort study of existing patients who have Alzheimer's and who have been taking this arthritis drug, that the reduced effects of plaque has appeared compared to their previous scans. So yeah, they're actually definitely doing clinical studies on that one at the moment. So.
Hmm,
Yeah,
that's
so
good.
good news for yes for us when we get older, and Alzheimer's may become a thing of the past.
Some of us before others, Andrew.
Yes, in reference to me turning 50 in the last few weeks. So yes,
It's, Getting on, mate. All right.
Yeah, just a correction. Yeah, it wasn't the microRNA story. It was, sorry, from Phys.org. That's
Oh, okay.
yes, yeah,
That
wrong
one was from
reference. It'll
Nature.
be all the correct links will be in the show notes. So anytime I make a mistake, well, I make a correction and then either the show notes or the comment section. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Alrighty. So on to your next one.
All right, new. This is a bit of an older story now. It's a few weeks. New larger funnel web spider
Oh
has
god.
been found in the Booderee National Park in Australia. All right. Though deadly to humans and often fatal in the past, anti venom was developed in 1981 by scientist Strauss Sutherland when he heard the death of a 7-year-old girl near Jervis Bay. And that's when the anti venom was developed. Up until then, older people who were ill or young children would actually die from the funnel web bite. It's one of the largest spiders found in Australia, one of the most venomous found in the world. Now, there's a new one, a whole new one, which appears to be, I wouldn't say a complete different genus, but it's a different genus, same species, but a different genus. So it is different from other funnel webs found in other areas. So, um, once again, another story off his org. So, yeah, a different funnel web which we didn't know existed. So, they said they found 40 in this one particular area and it hasn't been found elsewhere. So, new species finds are still happening all the time. So, uh, there is stuff still out there to be discovered, and
Alright.
not just in the insect world. In fact, they late last year they found a new mammal in South America. So, but this is interesting because there was also another different type of spider found up in the Northern Territory, related to the trapdoor spiders, and they've got several new species which are previously undiscovered. In this case, the fact that there's a whole new funnel web
Have the
is rather interesting. It remains to be seen whether its venom is different from that of the other funnel web,
that's what I was gonna
funnel
ask.
web.
I was gonna ask
Yeah.
to see whether or not that the antivenom was compatible. But
Yeah, I don't think that's an issue at the moment, but so they're just saying the fact that they found a new
they're only a
species
very small, aren't they? There's
or
only
new
a very
genus.
small, only a very small group of them, is it? Or because like I remember there was, I might have heard the same article, but I can't
Yeah, it
remember.
is
It
a small
was
group. It's in
yeah,
a small
it's not a
restricted
very big
area.
population, I don't think. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's. I mean, they're from the same species, but they're different genus, so it's a different branch, which is quite amazing. It's not often that you find that. To find a whole new species is something that's phenomenal in itself, or a new higher order. But this is, a different branch of the same family. But still, to find a different branch, and only in this particular area in the I can never say that quite right, the Booderee National Park, and that's where they're found and nowhere else. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's my spider story.
Alrighty, so we got another one here, which is actually to do with the good Dr. Robert C. Gallo, the guy that did a lot of the original research on the HIV virus, or
Okay.
the HIV virus originally.
Yes.
And he's been doing, and they've just started doing phase 1 trials for a novel HIV vaccine.
Okay.
So it seems to be potentially promising. They're only in phase 1, so it's just to see whether or not it's safe for human use, human trials. Um, I don't think, obviously, from what I've read, it doesn't seem like it'll be like a miracle HIV kind of cure or anything like that. But it potentially can lead on to more
Mm,
potent vaccines. There was one done in
mm.
2009 that I remember reading about, which had a 20% efficiency. So it was 20. I think it was 20 to 30% of people. Oh, sorry, it was one third. Sorry, that's right. It was one third of all patients that had been given it were
So
resistant.
very significant factor. Yes.
Yeah, it's not high enough for general use. It's not high enough for them to actually
Mm.
use. But it's just helping us get along the way. I mean,
It's significant.
we're
It's another tool in the.
yeah, we're like 30 years since we've been doing this for like 30 years, and we still
Mm.
don't know that much about it. So we're just trying. Like it's getting along though. It's getting more promising. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear that these things are still happening.
Yeah.
And I just thought that I would put that out there. I'll have the story and I'll put that in there. But there's not much else I would say than that. This is going on, that they're in phase 1 trials. Um, but yeah, it's extremely interesting. So.
Yes, I haven't had a chance to fully read the story. In the same vein, the other good news is finding that malaria, the
Oh,
parasite,
yep, yep.
yes,
Yeah,
has
yeah,
actually been found as a good vector for attacking or targeting cancer, many types of cancers. So it could be used for, I understand, I haven't had a chance to fully read the story up, so I will put a link in the show notes. Yeah, using to get and target cancer cells because it homes in on a particular protein. So I haven't looked at the story fully yet, but I will put a link in the show notes once I find that one again. Yeah, so it appears to be interesting. If you know any more about it, Riordan, do
yeah.
tell.
I don't know much more about it.
Yeah. So
I
that's
also
only,
saw that link.
yeah. Yeah,
Saw
it's only a
saw
few
that
days
article
old
as well.
story.
Yeah.
So, once again, Australian researchers in the medicine. This is why we need to keep funding our science, folks,
Yeah.
because a lot of the medical research coming out at national levels that are affecting worldwide issues are coming out of Australia. So, we need to keep the money rolling in. Yes.
Alrighty,
Yep.
so you've got another one, do you?
Yes. All right. Yeah. Now, this one is to do with batteries. Battery technology, yes. Every great battery is always only 5 years away, as it appears. Yes, the next battery leap is 5 years away, and it's always 5 years away before we have a new and improved battery. So once we get to 5 years, oh no, it's still 5 years away. But this isn't so much a quantum leap, although to use the popular vernacular, if you use it in the real term, quantum just means small. It is actual quantum leap because it is a small leap in this case, if you
God.
use the term correctly. It
Horrible.
Yeah,
Alright.
after 2 years of tests, confounding tests, decades of assumption on lithium ion design, graduate Stuart Yilang Li and undergraduate Stuart Sophie Meyer with a 10-person team challenged the assumption that precise amounts of carbon black are not crucial to overall battery performance. Carbon black is the type of carbon that they use in lithium ion cells. Now, it appears that it was assumed that, oh, we don't have to be too accurate in the type or structure of our carbon black. We can just throw X amount in and get the result we want. What they are saying is, no, you need to be precise in your measure and using the correct amount to improve the battery efficiency. They have managed to getting a increased 15 to 20% efficiency in battery storage and capacity just by using more precise amounts
So for the
of carbon
iPhone, that's
black.
like 20 seconds extra or something
Yeah, well, to an iPhone.
then.
But
Alright.
that is actually quite a significant on current technologies.
Yeah,
Quite a
that's big.
significant thing. Other people are, of course, looking at carbon nanotubes as a better way to make a better anode in lithium-ion batteries, and by using the correct amount of carbon black, it does make a difference. The type and the correct amount. So you need to be more precise in the measurements that they have found. As with current technology with batteries, they're not actually that precise to say, oh, as long as it's within, 20 or 30, 40 points this way or that way, close enough is good enough.
Yeah.
By the manufacturing specs, they're found no, you can make quite a vast difference by being more precise in your
I'm
measurements
assuming the reaction doesn't
and
get hung
type.
up so much trying to, like, if there's
Yeah,
not the exact right ratio to
yeah.
react, then yeah, it won't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, by getting the correct order at mount and the correct type, go away dog, the correct order and correct type of carbon black, then you can actually improve your battery capacity, storage capacity, and discharge time. So yeah, and that'll be a link in the show notes. So for all those years, people have made the assumption it makes no difference what you do with the carbon. Appears they're wrong. So that's the beauty about science. People look for not how things are working, but how things are not working, and then try to improve it. And this is science being self-correcting once again.
Yes, good. It's
Increment.
fantastic that there's people out. I mean, like just a small increase, what people would consider a small. It's not really a small. It's significant. For something that's capable of being done right now for no
Yeah.
extra cost is massive.
Well, and
That's
you're not
big.
just looking at an hour, you're then looking at an extra 20 minutes on a battery's capacity. So, and
Yeah,
once you start stacking batteries into packs and,
yeah,
overall, that's,
big, big.
that's an extra 100 Ks in your 400K electric car. So, yeah.
That'd be
So that's
25%. You lied to
yeah.
me.
But that is still a
It's
significant difference.
significant. It's a big difference. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a major leap, but it is, yeah,
It's
it's a small leap.
it's it's not perspective changing. It's just something like if you can find a solution, like a very simple,
Mhm.
trivial solution to something that is
Yes.
like right now, that's big, and that rarely happens because usually those things are thought about by people that are reasonably
Yeah.
smart beforehand. But yeah,
Yeah, groups of people. Most science is not done in isolation. Science is done in groups,
should never
and
be
it's
done in
done in
isolation.
increment. Yeah, it's done in increments. So if people seem to think, oh, it's the lone inventor, the lone scientist who comes up with a massive discovery. No, it's usually a group that comes up with a small discovery,
Barring
and that
very rare occurrences, like
yeah, even when people say, "Oh, Edison," look at the fantastic inventions. No, Edison had a workshop of over 100 people who would work on ideas and inventions that they came up with, and him. So he worked in a group. He didn't
yeah.
work alone. It was just the myth that he populated in the newspapers at the
But
time
what
because
about
it was
Nikola
great publicity.
Tesla, mate? What about Tesla?
Tesla was a lone scientist,
Yeah,
but he communicated with other scientists and
yeah. He had
so
some people. There
yeah.
are there are people that are brilliant, but yeah,
Yeah, some
it's
of his
not the
work was in isolation, but once again, he communicated with other people. So science is
pigeons
about
mostly.
increments and working in groups. Science is about sharing of information. So, the lone wolf is a lovely. It's a lovely romantic view. I mean, people say, "Oh, about the person who discovered that ulcers were caused by a bacterium rather than caused by stress. He worked by himself." No,
He had a partner there though,
it's
wasn't he?
yeah,
He had
the
another guy to work
Adelaide
with.
guy from Adelaide University who discovered the bacterium actually was working in a team. It just was that he wanted to prove the point that it was because it was going against the mainstream view at the time by
Ingesting it.
using himself as a test subject, which his team did not agree with doing because they had other ways of proving it. Just would have taken longer. He just wanted to make a stronger statement that would make people sit up and take notice in the scientific community
I
because he
like.
knew what he was doing, that he did that. He infected himself and cured himself because he knew he could do it. But he also worked with a team, and it was years of study and incremental advancements that got him there in the first place.
I disagree with
Yeah.
your non. You ignored my pigeon joke about Tesla.
Sorry.
You said he did communicate with other people, and I said mostly pigeons.
Mostly pigeons.
No, look, there are
Yes.
brilliant there
Yeah.
are brilliant scientists that do come up. There are some of them, but they're very rare. There's not
Yes.
many, and even those
Yeah.
people still are. I mean, look, who can I think of? Tesla,
I mean, even Feynman.
Isaac Newton. Isaac is another one, maybe.
Yeah. Isaac Newton. He wasn't
He
working
was a
so.
narcissist, though. He was
He
a
was a
massive
narcissist,
narcissist.
but he studied at a university. He communicated with Benjamin Franklin, another mathematician. So Isaac Newton wasn't. Was it Benjamin Franklin he used to communicate? They're all the same. Yeah.
I wouldn't know.
I have to go back and recheck my history on that. But yeah, he was in communication with other mathematicians at the time, and he also built his work on the back of other mathematicians that came ahead of him. There were
Oh
some
well.
Dutch mathematicians where he took some ideas and then he ran with them. Being, yes, he was a genius. Yes, he leaps and bounds, but he had a starting point from other people's work. The whole point about science and math and engineering is that um, we look at something and think, I could do better. And then a lot of people do better. Yes, you have geniuses like Feynman who was told, oh, you don't know anything about maths and you're stupid. So he went and taught himself calculus and other complicated mathematical.
Well,
Uh,
Richard Feynman learned a lot of this stuff when he was extremely young,
oh,
though.
yeah, he
Yeah.
learned a lot on his own,
Yeah.
but he also, once again, he went to university to learn from other people as
Actually,
well.
he learned. There was actually a really interesting.
Most of the stuff he learned before he went, yes,
Yeah,
because he
yeah, yeah.
was a genius, but it's
And
still,
also from his father as well. Oh,
yeah.
I won't go over it, but there's a really good documentary. If I can find it, if I can remember what it is, I'll post that in there as well. But that's an interesting one about Richard Feynman. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Story being that science is not done in isolation. Most not all, but most, like nearly all, is done with a team or
Yeah.
in cooperation. Even if you are isolated, you still need other people to look at your work, and you will get ideas from other people, and it's built upon the work of previous people that come before you. Um, Even original ideas have a seed or a gem of an idea coming from somewhere else, even if it's not even related. So, I mean, the classic example is, because Isaac Newton, the apple falls on my head. Why does the apple fall on my head? What is this force that pulls the apple down? So, the seed or gem of an idea came from an inspiration. So, and a lot of
Was
scientists
that
follow
was that
inspiration.
wasn't that a
It's an
falsified
allegory.
story?
In the end,
Like he
it's
didn't
an
actually do it.
allegory. It's an
Yeah, yeah.
allegory. It never actually happened, but it's the idea was that
It was a
inspiration,
pineapple.
yeah, inspiration comes from somewhere else.
Yeah.
You need a seed, and in science, most seeds and inspiration comes from other science and other seeds. Even if it's you go off in a totally different direction or it's unrelated, most of it comes from somewhere else. Science is the study of what and observation of what actually happens in the natural world and our understanding of it. But science does not happen in a pure vacuum. So, unlike energy
Unless
and
you're an
matter, we don't create
aviation
something out of
science.
nothing.
Unless
So,
you do aviation, then it may happen in a pure vacuum.
yeah, well, a lot of aviation science is we observe. Yeah, once no, science really. When you talk about aviation science, you're talking about observation, which is what science is. We see what happens in the natural world, the way things like bullion. Go away, dog. The the way airflow happens, and we make laws based on that. I mean, when they talk about the laws of thermodynamics, it's just an observation. Nobody's actually sat down and written complete proofs from scratch on how the laws of thermodynamics are laws of thermodynamics. They're more laws of observation, not mathematical proofs. So, there, yeah, the observation came first, the maths came later, not the other way around.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the laws of thermodynamics, things like quantum mechanics, the math came first, then the observations came later. So somebody sat down and worked out mathematically, is this possible? Okay, let's design tests to see if it is possible. Hello, the tests prove our math. As whereas thermodynamics, um, we've observed this. Let's come up with the theories of what we've observed. So, which is usually what happens. In quantum mechanics, we have a tendency to do it the other way around. We come up with the mass and then go out looking for an observation test data to see whether it does
Oh,
match
it's
the math.
infinitely, admittedly, it's infinitely harder to do it the other way around in quantum mechanics because of the way that it is. Like you're kind of, you
Uh,
need to kind of do mathematical models and then kind of look for it.
You do, because you're
Yeah,
working in an area that's dark that you
it's
can't
not
actually
really
see.
easy to find. Yeah, and you have to build the
You're
machines
not observing
purposefully
directly.
designed to
Yeah,
look for
and
that.
when yeah.
All right, well we'll get on with the other story anyway. I've got a kind of semi funny one. I think it's kind of funny as well anyway. Which was the discovery of two species of ant. Okay, so ants sometimes do steal from other colonies. But people really don't really you don't really think much about that. They just come along food. They're like, oh okay, ants are little robots. Really, they're insects, little robots. They're like, oh food. Oh, I'm gonna take that back to where I am. They
Yeah.
found out though that in two species, and I'll probably botch this, in Ectatotoma rudium and Mesoacicalatus, there are two. There in those two, they have a special caste of ants. So just like how you have worker ants, they have a special caste of ants that are specifically for thieving from other colonies. So there's an entire different caste of
Oh, yes, I
ants.
do remember reading
Yeah,
about this a while
yeah,
back.
yeah.
Yes,
And it's extreme.
chameleon ants. Yes,
Yeah, and they've got they what they do is to hide themselves. They have and they generally steal from the same ant species but different colonies, right?
yes.
So they have signature smells that they relate to each other. So obviously they've built up defenses to this as well, where they're capable of determining what the signature smell of another ant is to make sure that they're part of their colony. But the thieving ants, they have a signature smell that's kind of in between the two colonies, so that they don't get rejected by their own colony, but they don't get caught. But
Yeah.
sometimes they do get caught, and when they get caught, it's pretty funny. You'd think it would be a bloodbath, but it's not. This is a little line from it, which is quote from it. Sometimes the thieves get caught, but the consequences are not severe. When the thieves are caught, which happens once in a while, they get removed by ants who act like bouncers. They just pick up the thieves, who protest not a little bit, and carry them off about a meter or so and let them go. The next day, they're back to thieving like normal.
Yes, I have
Yeah.
heard of ants and actually taking the smell by once they've destroyed an enemy or opposite colony ant, then rubbing themselves in that ant
That
to
doesn't
get into the
surprise
colony.
me. That doesn't
Yeah,
surprise me. Yeah. It's
yeah. Ants are a perfect study in group intelligence because as a group they display traits of intelligence, but as individuals they display very
stupid.
low levels of intelligence.
Well,
Yeah,
they don't. I mean, they don't really have any. Like their problem solving is set algorithms to stimulus. So they,
yeah.
and then
Have fixed.
as a whole, they look very complex. But
Yeah, they
as
have
an individual,
non-adaptive. As individuals, yeah, they have non-adaptive intelligence. They have a set, like you said, set.
reaction to what happens
Yeah,
in the
set
environment.
group of algorithms. If X happens, do Y. Not if X happens, do Y, or possibly Z, or possibly maybe S if that's
It's
if you think that's good. No, they just X, do Y, and that's it. Um,
it's kind of like chaos theory, like we have a very complex set of things that occur, but because
mm,
they're so complex for us, we can't you can't keep track of what's going on. So to you, it looks like it's kind of an intelligent behavior, but it's not really. It's more of a complex outcome from simple rules.
yeah, it
That
is
yeah
simple based, but overall, ants as a group develop what they call not so much social intelligence, which is a different type of intelligence again, but they have group intelligence. So when they have come to a river, they can then form themselves into rafts, or they can
yes
move
yes
the
yes.
queen up. And protect the queen during storms when they're moving colonies. This is from a group intelligence, and that is, like you said, down to simple, basic rules which each ant has programmed
Well,
into
I
it.
mean,
Yeah.
our cells in our bodies have
But we
basic rules
have,
that
yeah,
they
we
apply
have
to as well.
overall adaptive intelligence, is that we
Yeah.
can change the situation. The situation changes, so can we. Ants, the situation changes, they have as individuals
Well,
not much hope of changing.
a good
As a group,
example
they do. Yeah.
a good example of that is death milling. Have you ever seen death milling with ants? Where
No.
they follow each other's scent trail and then they make a circle and they'll just run around in a circle until they die from exhaustion. Like it's a basic rule: follow the person in front of you, but they're all following
Yeah.
each other, so they follow around in circles. So some of these things can be massive until they just die. Sheep do it as well. Sheep actually have this behavior as well, where they'll follow each other
Yeah, they have a group. Yeah.
and they'll mill as well.
I know with sheep, the water might be 100 meters away. They might be in the hottest point of the day, in desperate need of water, but they won't move because everyone's waiting for the other sheep to move. No, you move. No, you move. No, you move. Well, once one sheep moves to go to get the water, they'll go. And groups of sheep have known to die within like hundreds of meters of water because they've all become dehydrated because the group hasn't moved. They move as a group. So sheep need prodding. So yes, once again, it's group intelligence rather than individual intelligence. They don't have the adaptive abilities to think on an individual level. Um, this sort of actual behavior, as psychologists would say, actually gets
Swarm
displayed in
logic.
crowds.
Yeah, swarm logic.
Yeah, it displays in crowd how crowds react,
Well, it was
react as a group rather than as an individual. That's why riots happen. Groupthink doesn't work.
there was actually a an article I was reading. This is months ago now, but I do remember it. Which someone was actually doing a calculation of group movement and how people will react in a group as a group to
Mm.
extremely high accuracy with predicting how groups will move for environments and so on and so forth and what will happen. And so we actually follow reasonably basic rules because when you kind of go in, let's to be honest, most of the day, it might seem like you're conscious because when you think about your consciousness, you're like, oh, I'm conscious, but it's like shining a torch around in the dark. Wherever you look, it's always light, but really, you're not like to be honest, you're not really conscious a lot of
No,
the
you
day.
run on
Yeah,
autopilot most of
autopilot
the
a
day
lot. Yeah, so it's
because our brains are designed to conserve energy, and if we have to do less thinking, we'll do less thinking, and so we use set patterns. Yes.
yeah. Have we got another story? I've got one more. If we want to do that.
I'm out of stories now. Yep.
I've got one more because I had one left over just in case.
The
Which
spare, in
was
case the other ones break down. Yes.
yeah, just in case I did something weird or whatever. I had it's to do with the Fukushima disaster actually. And they've actually been doing the government and so on and so forth were saying, oh, there's no issues with the. I'm not someone to do fear mongering because obviously I love nuclear power and I think that we should be adopting it, especially in Australia. But
If we have the safe version, not the current technology, but
well,
the
I mean, even the current technology is actually extremely safe in an environment like Australia. We're not we have no
yeah,
problems.
GFM,
Yeah,
yeah.
we're very
We're stable.
stable,
Yeah.
and the
But
climate's
yeah,
extremely stable.
there are options to make it
There are
safe.
safer versions, yes.
Cobalt reactors, they put themselves out. They don't have high pressure containment systems. Lovely safe technology. Nobody wants to build them. Yeah.
I think it's because I don't think that the energy efficiency is as high though. That's the reason why they're
It's
probably.
pretty no
I don't
with
know
the new
how much,
ones
but
they're pretty close. So I mean they're like 70% as opposed to
what
100%
kind of
compared to the other.
But they need a radioactive isotope of cobalt
They
though, don't they?
still do, but they don't need a above steam pressure to operate their turbines. They run at a lower pressure system, which is there's less likely to be having a contamination leak because you're going to have less blowouts from pipes.
Mm.
And if you want to douse a cobalt system, you have a weak point which dumps water onto the cobalt reactor and it automatically puts it out. It's a dry reactor. So once the water gets on it, end reaction. There's no runaway. You don't have a runaway with a cobalt reactor,
Both,
and
admittedly,
because
oh
it's a
sorry.
lower pressure system, you don't have explosions coming off a cobalt reactor, which is what makes them so much safer design. So,
Admittedly, a lot of these, mostly all of the
mm,
bad disasters that have occurred with new reactors have either been from very old reactors or have been from actual disasters in areas where they are
yeah,
prone to
in the case
disaster.
of Fukushima, they had
Yeah, it
double
was.
redundancy, not triple redundancy systems. And of the double redundancy systems, only one of the systems was currently functioning because the other one was down for maintenance, and they didn't have
Yeah,
a
but
third one.
they weren't checking it properly. Yeah,
No, it was mismanagement, which
yeah.
most nuclear disasters are due to mismanagement and not following safety issues or keeping up. In this case, the Nuclear Regulatory Authority should have been
On their ass.
on their ass and would have prevented this disaster. They weren't being checked regularly or thoroughly enough. So yeah,
But what happened with this anyway was the government was saying
yeah,
that there's not been any issues for the populace. It's all fine. So on and so forth. I mean,
yeah,
obviously there was in the original disaster they were giving iodine because obviously you want to saturate the thyroid with iodine so it can't actually get the isotope of the iodine that's.
it won't actually physically uptake the isotopes
Yeah, it
into your
won't
body.
because it's too
Yeah,
saturated to actually uptake it, so it'll just
yeah,
be passed through the urinary
yeah.
tract and urinated out.
Yeah, the radioactive isotopes look to the pituitary gland exactly the same as iodine does. Now, if you fill it full of
Thyroid
iodine,
gland, thyroid.
sorry, the thyroid gland,
Yep.
that you fill it full of iodine, then which you need to do in older people, young kids are usually saturated with it. Yeah, it can't take up anymore, so it rejects the isotopes, which
Yeah.
is why iodine is given to people in nuclear disasters.
Oh, it's also why if they need to treat a thyroid disease, they'll use a radioactive isotope of iodine to destroy part of the thyroid or destroy the
Yeah.
thyroid.
By
Um,
using a non-radioactive iodine, you prevent the
yeah.
radioactive one getting in there in the first place. So yes,
But what's happened is obviously they did that at the very start, and people are like, oh, the government's saying it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay.
yeah.
There's definitely an increase, and it's not just out.
Is this the
This
one
is
about the
out.
leukemia?
This is about thyroid cancer in children.
All right.
It seems to have gone up quite a significant amount, so it's obvious that they've kind of been telling people one thing when really there's been this research that's showing that it's definitely the case that this thyroid cancer is increasing in these
Yeah.
areas. So
No. Usually, a lot of times, it's the case that the adults need more iodine and the children need less. So is it that way? I always make sure. I'll have to double check on that. And yeah, obviously, in this case, they needed more.
mm.
Um,
Well, I mean, it's an issue. It's an issue for
it's
the direct area that obviously there is some environment, some impact on these people that are
There are
living in
still
these areas now.
hotspots in Fukushima. There are areas which are safer to go now, where the levels of radiation are no higher than standard background radiation.
Well, they
But yes, there
never.
are some level areas where people shouldn't be in because they've talked about recently the current power plant workers who are actually coming down with leukemia, which they've now actually traced directly to the Fukushima area. So Fukushima is still in some areas, and a lot of the areas, particularly the plant, is still not safe.
Comparatively to some of the older ones like Long Island and Chernobyl and stuff, the amount of radioactive output to the
It's
environment's
far lower.
far less, and there was a
Yes.
much better reaction to this because we've had things in the past we've been able to deal like to learn from, but yeah, it's still one of these things where you think, come on, like you know what's going on here. You know they don't want
Yeah,
to. They don't want to make people scared. I can understand that, but there is
it's
there is
also
a
part
fine
of the
line between people
culture
getting
of
help.
embarrassment, and the culture of embarrassment in Japan is we can't admit to doing wrong, therefore we'll cover it wrong because we don't want to appear to be doing wrong, and which unfortunately paralyzes a lot of action to stop something wrong happening in the first place. Um, this is which when it comes to issues of safety, you have to put face or your pride in the background. In Japanese culture, face, saving face, and pride comes foremost and and first.
I
And
have.
many people have died because of that. And yeah, it's a cultural issue that not that they don't want to be safe. It's just that they don't want to. When things go wrong, they don't want to. They don't want to appear wrong. It's about appearance, keeping up appearances for.
I also think like because I've had one of my good friends that I've known for a while. He's Japanese, obviously. And he was saying that one of the biggest issues is confrontation. They don't like confrontation. It's a
Yes,
very it's a
because it's
very
about losing
polite,
face.
very polite culture.
Yeah,
And
Japan only became a monoculture in the last 400 years. Prior to that, it was a culture of many fractured tribes and nations.
yeah.
It was united under the shoguns and then later the emperor. So then they brought in the monoculture, and it's become ingrained to not upset people or lose face or have confrontation, because you will lose face. This learnt from many years of dealing with Japanese in my Japanese language studies and from my Japanese martial arts through Japanese instructors. And not to mention my friend that also lived in Japan and told me, yes, with Asia, it's about losing face. Now, this unfortunately has affected the way in which Fukushima was dealt with and the way in which the cleanup process dealt with. We did not want to lose face, so we would tell people everything's fine, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
Uh, but Fukushima is not as bad as 3 Mile Island, and it has not been as bad as the Russian. Sorry, I
Oh,
forgot the
it's Three
name.
Mile Island. Sorry, I said Long Island.
Yeah, yeah, 3 Mile Island. And
Whoops. What is it? It's
yes,
it's a Long Island iced tea. Three
yeah,
Island.
3 Mile Island
Sorry, 3 Mile.
and Chernobyl. Chernobyl, when you look at Chernobyl, it's a really bad disaster because somebody turned off the safeties and said, "I wonder what happens if I do this." Bam! As they're running tests with the safeties off, and they shouldn't have been doing. But in the case of Russia, they're not worried about losing face. They went in and they started cleaning up, and they're still cleaning up, and they're admitting to the problem. So as you can see, it's a difference in the culture makes a difference in how they deal with the
Well,
problem.
during
Yeah,
during the point as well, because they were still in the Soviet Union at that point,
yeah,
weren't they? So for
yeah.
them, it was just like, oh, this thing happened. Let's just
Yeah,
deal
yeah,
with
but
it.
they if there's a problem, they admit to it. In the case of Japan, they've got much better technologies available for them to clean up, and just they've got a few cultural issues to overcome in their own culture about admitting there's a problem. We need to go deal with it rather than cover up. There's a problem. We'll deal with it later. So the Japanese themselves and government has admitted that, oh, we've made a mistake, and even the power company would admit to the mistakes of making mistake of covering up the mistakes instead of dealing with it in the first place. Yeah, this is, would say is going to be a continuing ongoing issue, which is unfortunate because it means people's lives are at stake. But it is not as bad as Chernobyl or the 3 Mile Island incident, even the latest one, which happened not long ago, which they had a blowout of a steam pipe in 3 Mile Island, but it shut the plant down and didn't cause a nuclear scare, thank goodness. The plant was shut down for a few weeks, I believe. Yeah. So yeah, nuclear power, or it's an old technology. Yeah, we need to update it. It is one of the tools in our technology, in our energy technology um, toolbox. The big issue with power is conserving and preserving it.
Batteries.
So
Yeah, batteries are the biggest issue.
batteries. We don't really have an issue with making power. We have an issue with storing it. So that is yeah, if we can start having these 5 year battery, always 5 years in the future, better batteries.
It's
If they can
alright, don't
start
worry.
happening
Cold
now,
fusion
it'd be
is coming
great.
anyway. Cold fusion is coming anyway soon, so it'll be fine.
Yeah, unfortunately, cold fusion is always 50 years in the future. Well, now they've put it down to 25 years in the future. Cold fusion, they've achieved it. Unfortunately, they have to put more
Ha-
power in to keep it going than they're getting out. So,
uh,
cold fusion is possible. It is possible, but unfortunately, it's energy negative,
I've not,
and it is only for a very short period of time.
I've not heard much about it. I mean, the only things I've heard about it because I've
Yes.
looked into it at one point, and there's so many falsified experiments for
Oh,
places to
they
get
have
funding.
achieved not cold fusion. They've achieved warm fusion, not cold fusion. Cold fusion is different. Yeah, nobody's ever been able to replicate the results of cold fusion. So yes, there have been hints that maybe it did work because the levels of radiation coming off and gamma radiation was extremely high, but nobody's been able to reproduce it. If you can't reproduce
Yeah,
the results from the same input, then yeah, you basically falsified the theory. As to regular fusion, yes, we've been able to achieve it, but unfortunately, it's for a very short period of time, and it requires more fuel and energy going.
current fusion
Yeah,
technologies with laser arrays and so on and so forth. They actually, if we're talking about actual proper fusion technology,
yeah, it actually works.
modern fusion technology, they actually did get more energy out than they put in
Yeah,
recently.
well, they've got high levels, but they haven't achieved what they call
But
above.
it's not practical. It's not
No,
practical at the
because
moment.
it's
But
too
there's
short a period of
in an
time. It's
experiment
not
they could.
self-sustaining for long periods of time. And like I said, to contain it, run the field, they're using more energy to contain it than the amount of energy they're getting back out. Yes, they're getting higher levels of energy than the actual fuel consumes. So fuel in joules in is smaller than fuel than energy in heat joules out. That's small. But then to run the power to contain it and start it, that's taking more energy. So they're still in an energy negative deficit, and they're not able to maintain a uh,
Regular
long,
fusion technologies
yeah,
are actually feasible within
yeah.
some
They're just,
time scale, though at least,
yeah,
rather than the whole cold fusion kind of
they're
joke.
building. Somebody's building. Oh, I'm trying to remember. Siemens are building a new plant. We're looking in France, and they're talking about 25 years before we're in the future before they're able to get it fully operational.
A practical
A
version
practical
of
one,
it. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's just a matter
At the
of being
moment, it's
able to
still experimentation.
maintain the process and maintain the fusion and keep the reaction self going and being able to feed the fuel in without breaking the containment field. They haven't quite cracked that one yet.
Yeah, it's still
You put fuel in, start a fusion, but you can't break the containment field to get more fuel in because then you stop the process stops.
Well,
Um,
they use a big vessel anyway that's extremely thick steel and other materials that don't actually take uptake heat very well. I think they're kind of similar to the tiles that we use on shuttle. I think
yeah,
it's
that
some
and
kind of
magnetic.
material, and then they use some electronic.
Yeah, they use
I,
magnetic field
yeah, to
containment.
contain it. Yeah.
It's usually in a torrid shape. There's also a new, it's so basically like a donut, but there's also a new circular one that is being currently developed and it's starting to show promise. So we should know within the next 25 years whether it's going to happen.
Well, it's not a
So,
case of whether or not it's feasible. It's just the time period because we know it's
yeah,
feasible because of this.
we know
I
it's
mean, the
feasible. We
sun
don't
works
quite have the
to
technology
do it. Yeah,
to
yeah.
do it. That's what I'm saying when we're talking about feasibility.
Talking about
We know it's possible.
practicality.
Possible or feasible are two different things. So yes, it's possible. Is it feasible? Not at the moment. In the future, yes, it will be.
Actually, one of the things
Yeah.
that was extremely interesting, and I'm kind of stealing this a little bit from one of the interviews from with Bill Nye a long time ago. Was talking about it's really interesting
Good
because
engineer.
using big massive objects and during power production you lift them, and then at when the times when you don't need them you allow them to fall in power generators. So
Yeah,
yeah, and
that,
you
that
use that
technology
potential
actually
energy.
dates back to the 18th century, where they used to have what they call hydrostatic accumulators, where they actually pump heavy weight up
And then
with
allow the pressure to
underneath,
push it. Yeah.
and now then when they need the power, then they actually use in the tower at the London Bridge to raise the gates. That they pump water to these big massive cylinders that weights that sit on top of the water. When they want to raise the gates, they release, and the water flows out, which then lifts the gates up. So they're called accumulators.
Yeah.
And yeah, they are used extent. They currently are used in a small scale where they pump water from a lower dam up into a higher dam, and then when they need more energy, they release that water, which then generates electricity.
We're talking more about extremely massive objects like
Yeah, very massive. So
tens of
massive.
thousands of tons,
They're
stuff
called
like that.
accumulators, basically hydraulic accumulators. Yeah, we can do it. It's just an engineering thing, and it's quite possible to do. It just would cost a lot of money to do. Um, but small accumulators, natural gravity fed accumulators do exist, where they pump water up into a dam on high energy, low energy demand. The water's pumped up when energy is needed really quickly at high peak demand. The water's let run down to run a turbine into the lower dam. Then when nobody needs more power, they pump the water back uphill again.
Yeah.
So it's called a hydraulic accumulator. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an old technology and it's a good one. Yes, there is losses, but it's a great way to store potential energy.
It's better. It's more efficient than battery technologies at the current moment.
Yeah,
That's the thing.
actually,
Yeah.
you do. Yeah, because you don't get the losses that you have a battery where the energy leaks away. So it stays.
And
What you
also, you don't have the problems of internal resistances that batteries have, and so on and so forth.
no,
Yeah.
it's not as efficient in one respect because you're getting chemical reactions. The battery's doing a lot of the work for you. Yes, you've got to put power into it to get that storage, that power, and cause a chemical reaction. But the battery does a lot of the work for you. So the reason why accumulators are efficient in one respect is that they keep nearly all the power you put into them. It's
Yeah.
just it just takes a lot of power to get them here in the
Charged.
first
Yeah.
place, and it's a one-way system because then you've got to pump the water back up again, so you need more energy. So yeah, there are losses always with energy, things like resistance, so you lose through that.
You lose something to the system
Yeah,
eventually. There's no
it's
perfect system for
is it
this.
first or second law of thermodynamics? I can never remember that. Yes, yes. Energy's there's always a loss, whether it be through. It's always via heat. So whether
Friction, heat,
friction,
sound. Yeah.
yeah. When you talk about friction, you are
You
talking
talk
about
about
heat.
heat. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
resistance. You're talking about heat. Yeah, that's how it's. And heat is basically excited particles. The
It's kinetic
particles.
energy.
Yeah, it's kinetic particles vibrate really quickly, and so therefore they lose a lot of their energy, and it's radiated away. In this case, the form of transferring energy from one particle to the other, which is what we call heat. So, but yeah, accumulators, wonderful idea. Bill Nye, yep, he's very much right. We do need to build big accumulators, and I remember some cars in the 80s and 90s used to do that by using a flywheel that actually
Yeah.
store
Yeah. It's.
kinetic energy. It's a spinning accumulator, and it was then called upon when it's
I
needed.
was watching BattleBots and they had good accumulators in that. Big spinning.
Yeah. So you can use a hydraulic accumulator where it's a static energy which is stored, waiting for potential energy. The weight's pressing down on the water, or you can have spinning accumulators where,
Well, a
yeah,
hammer's an
a
accumulator,
flywheel.
isn't it? Because you're storing energy in a hammer until you murder someone.
Well, actually, the kinetic energy is stored in you.
Yeah. Ooh. Well, you do store, you impart some energy to the actual hammer itself, so it's kind of.
Not when it's resting; it's at zero.
No, I mean when you
When you, yes,
use
yeah,
it. That's
that's
what I mean. You're storing energy in it
yeah,
for
yes,
that
because you're
very brief
transferring.
period.
It's a very lossful energy, but yeah.
Especially when you hit
So
someone.
accumulators, yeah, it's an old idea, which is probably going to be given a more new lease of life. It's used to some extent in a small way, particularly through hydroelectricity today and storage in some areas. But yeah, such a good idea. Yeah.
Alrighty, so we're done for today, are we?
I
Or
think we're done. That's it
alrighty.
for stories. Any corrections that we may have, we would appear in the show notes. Any stories we mentioned, we will have links once again in the show notes for those that have watched our show. And thank you very much for watching.
Alrighty, thanks guys. Alright, we'll see you on the next episode.
See you
Alright,
then.
bye.